The scariest part was that nothing happened. No betrayal, no slammed doors. Just one night where I looked at him across the room and realized I didn't know what he was thinking anymore.
When people drift apart without meaning to, it rarely feels like loss at first. It feels like a new normal you keep agreeing to quietly until you can't remember the last time you were truly met.
In the beginning, he met me in small ways that felt deliberate, not grand, not performative, just present. I remember the first time I noticed it. We were in a dim little place with windows that made everything outside look like a watercolor. Rain smeared the streetlights. My sleeves were damp from holding my umbrella wrong. He listened like he didn't have to prove anything, like he wasn't waiting for his turn. When I paused mid-sentence, because I do that, I disappear inside my thoughts. He didn't rush to rescue the silence. He just waited, and somehow that felt like being allowed to be a full person.
Early connection often feels like relief, especially for those used to being talked over or half seen. The body remembers what it's like to not brace.
We started building a rhythm that made the days feel less sharp. He'd text when he got out of work, one message, no extra sparkle, heading home. And I would feel my shoulders drop like they'd been holding something up all day. Some nights we'd cook together in his narrow kitchen. The cutting board always slid a little because one corner was warped. The overhead light was too bright, so he'd turn on the warmer lamp by the window and let the corners of the room go soft. He had this habit of rinsing his hands and then shaking the water off like a dog, quick, thoughtless, and I'd laugh every time. He'd say, "What?" And I'd say, "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was familiarity arriving early.
That's how people fall in love when it's quiet, not with announcements, but with repeated moments that say, "I notice you, I'm here, I'm staying." Those moments matter. They form the private language of a relationship, shared attention, wordless generosity, a sense of us. And when that attention slowly shifts through reasonable things like fatigue, stress, or busyness, it doesn't always look like neglect. Sometimes it looks like being here, technically, while the mind is elsewhere. The body notices those micro moments when invitations aren't received, when inclusion fades and something inside starts to go quiet. Comfort becomes an unspoken agreement. One person carries the emotional temperature of the home, the other rests inside it.
When we decided to live together, it wasn't framed as some huge leap. It felt like the next logical step in a life that was already merging. We found a place that was almost cute if you didn't look too closely, the kind of apartment where the hallway smells like someone else's dinner, and the elevator light flickers like it's tired. The first night we moved in, the rooms echoed because there wasn't enough furniture yet. Our voices sounded younger in the emptiness. We ate takeout on the floor, backs against the couch that hadn't been unwrapped. He handed me the last dumpling without asking if he wanted it. It was such a small thing, but I remember it like it mattered. For a while, living together made everything softer. Morning light spilled through the cheap blinds in pale stripes. I'd wake up first and hear him breathe in that deep way people do when they feel safe. Sometimes I'd just lie there and listen, like I was memorizing proof. We had little rituals that weren't planned. He'd make coffee and leave the mug on the counter for me, steam curling up like a quiet invitation. I'd fold laundry and toss him his socks in a small arc, and he'd catch them against his chest like it was a game. At night, he'd ask, "Door locked?" And I'd say yes. And he'd say, "Okay." Not suspicious, not controlling, just a soft checkpoint, like we were closing the day together. I used to tell myself that this was what people meant when they said home, not the apartment, him. Then it started changing in ways that were almost too ordinary to catch. At first, it was just the timing. He'd come home and stay standing near the door a little longer, scrolling on his phone like he needed to decompress before stepping into the night with me. I didn't mind. Everyone needs a second. Then a second started stretching. He'd say, "Give me a minute," and I'd hear it from the kitchen while I stirred something on the stove, watching the oil go glassy in the pan. I'd answer, "Yeah," because it sounded reasonable. Because it was reasonable. We were still kind. That's what made it confusing. He still kissed me when he walked in, quick, familiar, the way you tap a light switch. His hands were sometimes cold from outside, and I'd hold them for a second longer than necessary. I lay there listening to the apartment settle, pipes, distant traffic, the soft hum of the fridge. His breathing changed, slow and even. And I remember thinking, very quietly, if this is what it feels like while we're okay, what does not okay feel like? After that, I started paying attention to what we didn't do anymore. We didn't circle back. If one of us said, long day, it just sat there. No follow-up. No, what happened? We used to ask the second question without thinking. Now it felt like we'd both agreed not to. Some nights we ate dinner with a show on, not even because we wanted it, just because it filled the spaces where our voices used to go. The TV light turned his face cooler than it was in the kitchen. I'd watch his expressions change for characters on a screen, and then go neutral again when the episode ended. There were still good moments. That's what makes it hard to explain. He'd bring me water if I forgot it. He'd pick up my favorite snack without being asked. He'd remember the name of my coworker's dog. But those were maintenance gestures, kind, thoughtful, practical. And I realized I was starving for something different. Not proof that he cared. Proof that he was with me. At night, when I tried to talk, my voice kept getting smaller. I'd start a sentence and hear his phone buzz. Not even his fault, just the sound, the light, the reflex. And I'd end my sentence early, as if the ending didn't matter. Sometimes he would look up, notice my pause, and say, "Sorry, what?" And I'd say, "Nothing, it's fine." Because by then it didn't feel worth the rewind. We became good at being near each other. He'd work at the little desk in the corner, headphones on, fingers moving fast. The glow from his laptop made his eyes look far away, even when he was sitting 10 feet from me. I'd move through the kitchen in warm light, tea kettle, cutting board, the soft clink of a spoon against a mug. I started cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, wiping the same counter twice, folding towels that were already folded. It wasn't nervous energy exactly. It was me trying to make my presence useful, so it felt justified. There was a night where we drove to pick up takeout. The car was warm, the windows fogging at the corners. Streetlights passed in slow, sleepy flashes. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift. I watched his knuckles, the familiar veins, the small scar near his thumb. I waited for him to reach over and find my hand like he used to. He didn't. And I didn't want to be the one to grab his, because I was tired of always being the one who reached first. So I just sat there and listened to the turn signal click like a metronome. He asked, "What do you want to watch later?" And it sounded normal. It sounded like us. But it was also a way to keep us in safe territory. I said, "Whatever you want." And I meant, I don't want the wrong thing anymore. At home, we ate on the couch. 2 containers, 2 forks, 2 people angled toward the TV like it was a third person we didn't have to disappoint. He laughed at something on his phone, short, bright, and for a second I felt relief. Like, there you are. I looked at him and waited for him to say, "Look," to share it, to pull me in. He didn't. He just kept scrolling, the smile fading, replaced by that blank focus people get when they're consuming something they won't remember. I watched my own fork scrape the bottom of the container and realized I was trying not to cry over something I couldn't properly name. I started noticing how often I talked to other people more than I talked to him. If something funny happened, I'd text my friend first. If something stressful happened, I'd sit with it alone until it passed, not to punish him, just because it felt easier than trying to open a door that might only crack an inch. And then I'd feel guilty, because he'd still do nice things. He'd still say "love you" when he left for work. He'd still make sure the bills were paid. So I'd tell myself, this is what long-term looks like. This is normal. You're expecting too much. But the apartment kept feeling colder in places that weren't about temperature. The realization came on a Tuesday that wasn't special. The kind of day with gray light and a quiet kind of fatigue. I got home first. The apartment was dim except for the little line of light under the bedroom door where the lamp was on. I put my keys in the bowl by the door and stood there a second too long, listening to nothing. Then my phone buzzed. My mother, a message. Something small, not even an emergency. But it hit me the wrong way, and I felt that familiar sting behind the eyes. Not full crying, just that pressure. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on. I stared at the carpet and waited for the feeling to pass. When he came home, I heard the door, the keys, the familiar sound of him taking off his shoes. I heard him call my name, not loudly, just enough. "Babe," I answered from the bedroom in here. He stepped into the doorway and leaned against it, still holding his phone. His tie was loosened. His face looked tired in a way that wasn't dramatic, just worn. He said, "You okay?" And I almost told him. I almost let the truth come out in one clean sentence. Instead I said, "Just a weird day." He nodded. "Yeah, same." Then, this is the part that stayed with me. He smiled a little at his screen. Not big, just a small private curve of his mouth. And he said, "Sorry, work group chat is blowing up." And I watched him step out of the doorway while I was still sitting on the bed, still holding that feeling like a glass I didn't know where to set down. He came back a few minutes later, Kinder, Prisoner. He sat beside me and put a hand on my knee. What happened? His voice was soft. And I could have said everything I'd been collecting for months. Every micro moment, every quiet disappointment. But I looked at his face and saw how tired he was, and something in me did that old thing. It made my needs smaller to protect him. So I told him a version that didn't cost much. Nothing. Just, my mom's stressed. It's fine. He nodded like he'd completed his role correctly. He squeezed my knee once and said, "It'll be okay." Then he stood up. "I'm gonna shower." And when he left the room, I felt it. Not anger, not heartbreak in some dramatic way, just the quiet realization that even when he tried, he still didn't stay long enough to meet me. I sat there on the bed and listened to the shower start. Water hitting tile, steam filling the small bathroom. And I thought about how many times I'd chosen fine because it was lighter, how many times I'd accepted later because it sounded reasonable, how many times I'd convinced myself that wanting more attention meant I was asking for a performance. But what I wanted wasn't a performance. It was participation. I wanted him to turn toward me without me having to explain why turning toward me mattered. I realized I'd been living with a person who still loved me, but had stopped noticing me. And I didn't know which was worse, that he wasn't doing it on purpose, or that he wasn't doing it on purpose. I think he believed we were good because nothing was breaking. We paid rent. We ate dinner. We slept in the same bed. We were polite. We were functional. We were okay. And I think I believed I was being mature by not asking for too much, by not starting conversations at the wrong time, by not turning loneliness into an accusation, by not making him feel like a failure. So we both kept choosing the version of us that required the least from the moment. After that Tuesday, nothing changed right away. The next morning, he kissed my forehead like always. The coffee machine made the same sound. The sunlight came through the blinds in thin stripes like it always did. He asked if I wanted anything from the store later. I said, "No, I'm good." And there it was again, me being good. Me being easy. Me being the kind of partner who doesn't ask the relationship to hold too much weight. That night, we stood in the kitchen together. I was washing a plate. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling. He looked up and said, "We should plan something this weekend." I said, "Yeah, that'd be nice." And I meant it. I did, because planning something sounded like movement. But in the quiet after, I realized something else. I didn't want a weekend plan. I wanted a Wednesday night where he asked me one real question and waited for the real answer. Later, when the apartment went dark and the TV became the only light, I watched him from the corner of my eye. He was right there, breathing, existing, warmth in the room. And I felt that strange, familiar contradiction, the comfort of his presence, and the loneliness of not being reached. I turned my face toward the pillow and kept my breathing even. Not because I was okay, because I didn't know what it would take to not be okay out loud. And somewhere in the quiet, I admitted the simplest truth I'd been avoiding. We didn't fall apart. We just stopped meeting each other and kept calling it normal.
No malice, just a pattern that forms quietly and begins to feel permanent. That realization is the beginning of awareness, the moment you stop bargaining with the feeling and admit something can be wrong without anyone doing something wrong. As connection fades, people often replace it with noise, not because they're shallow, but because silence might reveal something they don't know how to hold. People disappear inside their own relationships, not from lack of love, but from believing their inner world is inconvenient. They become indispensable instead of wanted, stop asking for what they need to avoid being too much, and live in half sentences. The pain isn't the phone or the distraction. It's the moment of not being invited into someone's inner life. Love can exist without access. Care can remain while emotional availability disappears into logistics and routines that never get updated. That's the tragedy of drifting. Both people trying to be reasonable, to keep things calm, not realizing calm has started to cost them intimacy. Because drifting isn't always a breakup. Sometimes it's two people living side by side, while one of them quietly learns how to miss someone who's still there.